All right, grade 9s, we're moving on to our next lesson. So today we're looking at being able to solve equations with variables on both sides. So this is where flipping the equation doesn't work to move it to the left, all the variables to the left, because we got them on both sides. Flipping means the one that was on the right is going to move to the left, but the one that was on the left is going to move to the right. So before we are able to solve this, the proper, or maybe I should say the easiest way to deal with this is, in fact, to simplify it as much as we can first. So we want to add any like terms together. Okay, so remember when we're doing that, we're going to look at the left side and add any there, and then we're going to look at the right side. That's just going to simplify it for us. Okay, here's the new step. The new step is going to be to, in fact, remove the variables from the right side. Not by flipping, but by using, so from the right side, by using the opposite. So if we have an x that is added on the right, we're going to subtract it. If we have an x that is subtracted on the right, we're going to add it. So we're going to use the opposite of add and to subtract to get rid of it. And then we're just going to go on and remove any add or subtract numbers, remove any multiply and divide numbers. And remember, we're using opposites for that. So an add, we use a subtract, a multiply, we use a divide, etc. Let's move on to the examples. First one here. We can clearly see that we have an x on the left and an x on the right. So I suggest you look at it and see if you can add any like terms first. Well, we've got 7x's and a positive 2, not alike there. On the right side, we've got a 12 and a 2x, and again, those aren't like terms, so we can skip that first step of adding any like terms. So now, really what we want to do is we want to get rid of the variable over here. So this is an add 2x, so we're going to do the opposite. We're going to subtract 2x's. Okay, that means adding 2 and subtracting 2 gives us 0 x's. We've gotten rid of it. Now what you want to do is find the x group on the other side, and you have to do the same thing, subtract 2 x's from it. Okay, so 7x's minus 2 x's is going to give us 5 x's. Okay, so we've got all the x's now on the left. Let's bring down what is left. So we have a plus 2 and we have an equals 12. Now we need to get rid of any add or subtract numbers. So because that's an add 2, we're going to subtract 2. Do the same thing to the other side. Add 2, subtract 2 becomes a 0. And we're left with 5 x's on the left. And 12 minus 2 gives us 10 on the right. Lastly, on this question, because we have 5 timesing the x, we're going to do the opposite of multiply, which is a divide. So we're going to divide by 5 on both sides. 5 divides by 5 to give us 1. 1x is what we want. That gives us our x all by itself. And 10 divided by 5 gives us 2. We solved it. Okay, you're going to have to be able to check just to make sure that in some cases your answers are right, or because I've asked you to do some checks in the assignment. So reminding you, with a check, the first thing you need to do is to just rewrite the equation. So 7x plus 2 is equal to 12 plus 2x. That's exactly what was over there. We've just copied it down. The second step is to substitute. So we're going to take our 2 and we're going to put it in wherever we see an x. Remember to use a bracket. So 7 bracket 2 plus 2 on the left, and 12 plus 2 bracket 2 on the right. So we've substituted in the answer to where we see the x's. Now we use BEDMAS. Okay, and we're just going to calculate left side, calculate right side. So here is BEDMAS we're going to use here. So multiply first. 7 times 2 is 14. Copy down the rest. Now 14 plus 2 is 16. Now we're going to look at the right side. Multiply first, again, because we've got an add and a multiply, so 2 times 2 is 4. And then 12 plus 4 gives us 16. And if we have 16 on the left and 16 on the right, the last step is to compare. And because left equals right, we know our answer of x equals 2 is the correct answer. Okay, I'm going to move on to a second example. Just a little bit more complicated because now there's a negative sign in there. So, first step, add any like terms, x's and number groups not alike, x's and number groups not alike, so we can skip that first step. Second step is to remove the variable. So we see 3x here. We want to subtract that 3x away. Remember, that has the invisible positive sign in front, so you're using the opposite, which is to subtract 3x. Now, find the x group on the other side and do the same thing, minus 3x's from that. So positive 3x's minus 3x's gives us 0x's. We've gotten rid of them. Now, 2x's minus 3x's gives us negative 1x. Copy down the rest, minus 5 is equal to 30. Whoop. Right, remembering that the objective is to get the x all by itself, so we have to get rid of this negative 1, multiplying it, and the minus 5 being subtracted, or the 5 being subtracted from it. So get rid of the add or subtract first. So if this is a minus 5, we're going to add 5. That means we have to add 5 to the other side. Subtract 5 and add 5 becomes a 0. We're left with negative 1x is equal to 30 plus 5, which is 35. Now, we don't want to find the answer for negative 1x. We need to find the answer for x. So we need to get rid of the negative 1. So we're going to, that's a multiply, so we're going to divide by exactly the same number. So we're dividing by negative 1. Divide this side by negative 1. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 is 1. That gives us x. And 35 divided by negative 1 is negative 35. We've solved it. Okay, our third example, moving on to something a little more complicated. So we're going to have to use the first step, which is to just simplify the equation by gathering any like terms or adding like terms. So let's maybe draw a line here as they get more complicated. So we're looking at the left side first. So looking at the left side, I can see some like terms. X's can be put with other x's. So remember, that's the invisible positive 7x and negative 3x. So when you take positive 7 and you put it with negative 3, you get positive 4x's. So those two became positive 4x. And then we'll just copy down the next, minus 14 is equal to, and again on the right side we've got some like terms. There's an x group, there's an x group. So negative 2x and negative, remember that's invisible 1, so negative 2 and negative 1, when we put those together, we end up with negative 3x's. The next stage or step is to get that variable that's on the right-hand side to the left. Remember, you're using the opposite of add and subtract. So if this is a minus 3x's, we're going to do the opposite, which is add 3x's. Find the x group on the other side, and we're going to add 3x's there as well. Minus 3x's and adding 3x's becomes a 0. Now, some people or students stress out and they think, well, I've got nothing left. Well, that's okay. You can have a 0 here. So there's 0 now on the right side. 4x's plus 3x's gives us 7x. Copy down the minus 14. So now we've got 7x minus 14 is equal to 0. Remember, we're trying to get x all by itself, so we want to get rid of the minus 14 and the 7. So the add and subtract first. So because that's a minus 14, we're going to add 14. Do the same thing to the other side, add 14. That's a 0. And we're left with 7x on the left is equal to 0 plus 14, which is 14 on the right. Last stage is to get rid of the 7 multiplying the x, so we're going to divide by 7 on both sides. And x equals 14 divided by 7, which is 2. We've solved it. All right, one last example here. Start off with adding any like terms. So on the left side, again, maybe I'll separate this so we can see. This is the invisible 1, so 1x plus 3x, that gives us 4x when we put those together. On the right-hand side, we'll put our x group first. Remember that negative sign belongs to the 3x, so our equal in between and negative 3x. And then we've got numbers and numbers. So that's an invisible positive 4, and positive 3 gives us positive 7. The next step is to get rid of the variable on the right. So this is a minus 3x. So we're going to do the opposite of subtract. We're going to add 3x's. Find the x group on the other side and add 3x's. That's 0x's now on the right. Let's bring down what we've got. So 4x's plus 3x's gives us 7x's. On the right-hand side now, all we have is positive 7. You can put the positive sign if you wish, but you don't have to. Now, 7 times x, we need to get rid of that 7 by doing the opposite, which is divide by the time, do the opposite, which is divide by the same number, which is 7. And 7 divides by 7 to give you 1x, or x, and 7 divided by 7 gives you 1. We just solved it. All right, so now your task is to go on and finish the assignment on solving equations with variables on both sides. Do your best. Talk to you soon.